You are now entering the realm of the freaky deaky, an unsuspecting stop at the crossroads of fantasy and reality, where the frayed edges of make-believe seep into this cookie-cutter white picket world you've been led to believe is far from extraordinary. What you're about to hear are true stories.
Alleged true stories.
Christian, just... okay? Tales of the strange and inexplicable thought only to exist in film and folklore. Although difficult to accept, we do not know everything about this reality, about time or space, what lies beneath the ocean's depths. And try though we might, the unchanging truth remains. There are some things we legitimately cannot explain logically.
All that's a roundabout way of saying welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to the Freaky Deaky. If you haven't already, swing by the socials, give us a follow. It is at Freaky Deaky Pod on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at TFD Paranormal on TikTok. If you got a story of your own that you want to share with the podcast, hear it told on the podcast. It's the gang at thefreakydeaky.com. We would love to hear it. You're here for scary nurse stories, so I think we should actually dive into that.
There's a lot of stories out there. I have a lot of nurse friends and a sister that's a nurse, so I have a feeling we're going to get some stories from people the pod knows pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a nurse, know a nurse, and you have a story, send it in.
Which you probably do. You
Yes.
probably have at least one story if you're a nurse.
What's our pod's phone number so that they can leave a voicemail if they want to?
801-997-0051. Leave up to a 3-minute voicemail for us. We love hearing from you guys.
And if you have a longer story, just call us right back.
There you go.
We know
Leave
how to put it together.
Yeah, we're smart like that.
Scott's smart like that.
Yeah.
Unless it's an NFT.
Yeah, Scott's not NFT smart like that. We'll make your voicemail into an NFT. How's that?
All right, here we go. This one's from Reddit. Equal Variety 8646.
That rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yes. LOL, I guess I'll be the first. Which kind of works out.
You are.
I used to work on a floor that had a connecting flex unit that, depending on capacity, we would use. There was a back row of rooms and a front row of rooms with hallways connecting them. The 2 rooms at the ends of the back row were oversized rooms and very nice, but for some odd reason, I always hated going near or into them. When we had patients there, I would always have this dreaded feeling when I checked on them during rounds. So one night I'm in the front row of rooms facing the hallway towards the back row. I'm all spun around now, but I think all our listeners get it.
Sure.
And I'm messing with the vital cart. When in my peripheral vision, I see a black shadow, the size and shape of a person, walk/glide down the back row of rooms toward one of the end rooms, maybe 15 feet in front of me. And visiting hours are over at this point. It was actually right around midnight. So I go to the back row from a different hallway, not trying to get myself killed by someone hiding around the corner, see if the light is on next to any of the doors down there, indicating there's a patient in those rooms. Nope, no patients down there, and no visitors were given special permission to stay the night. So yeah, definitely avoided that assignment as much as possible.
A little spooky.
Yeah, not too much into that one, but...
Starting off with some shadow people.
Yeah.
It's always a good topic. We should do a second shadow person episode.
Yep.
That was a fun one.
There seems to be a lot of shadow people in the hospitals.
Yeah.
Or that nurses see.
I mean, it's a very common paranormal sighting, I think, just in general. Like, I think anyone that is familiar with the paranormal is aware of shadow people. I've seen several shadow people just in my life. I know several people that have seen multiple shadow people all throughout their life. I mean, look at Amanda from, the season 1 finale. She saw shadow people. It's a very common thing. Like,
I've seen shadows, many shadows in my life.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably not nearly as scary as people form, but there's that one, I think I mentioned it at some point, but when I was walking around my neighborhood back home, and at one point I remember I just turned my head to the right, and in my peripheral vision, I saw my shadow, and then behind my shadow, I saw a second shadow walking very quickly up to catch up with me, and it scared the shit out of me. That I freaked out, like walking alone on this road. I freaked out. I was like, oh, God. And I turned and there's nothing there.
Yeah, I remember you telling that story. That's a scary one.
Yeah.
Probably not anything other than the sunlight reflecting off something else, but it would still mess with your, even if it's just legitimate.
For sure.
It would mess with your brain in a way that's just not right.
it scared the hell out of me. Regardless of what it actually was, like it could have been a second shadow of myself being refracted and moving closer because something was in the distance shining at me. Sure, but I think the sun was also in a location in the sky where it was less likely that was the case.
Can you tell time by the sun?
Mm-hmm. I can also tell time by when I left the house and roughly how many minutes into the trip I was. But if I needed to, I could look up and be like, oh, it is roughly 3:46 p.m.
I don't understand how more people can't do that.
Yeah. Out here, it's a little harder.
Yeah.
It's a little harder out here.
Yeah, we grew up kind of closer to the middle of the world in the desert where there's a lot of sun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Where we'd have things like high noon.
Yeah.
Don't really have high noon out here so much as you have noon. Just noon.
Every time high noon is mentioned, you need to put the little whistle sound. Yeah, you know what I mean, but that wasn't a very good whistle.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what whistle are you talking like the old cowboy? Like,
yeah.
Okay.
You want to read one?
This next one comes to us from Lizard06. Lizard06. 2 D's in Lizard, if anyone's wondering. Nobody was. Nursing student pizza.
What the hell is
nursing student pizza? I don't know, but I'm reading what's there. There's this ghost we call the nurse at my nursing home. Sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
The facility is built over an old TB asylum. My coworker told me on nights she'll stand at the end of residents' beds and pinch their toes. My coworker stands over their beds and pinches their toes?
No, the ghost. Okay. My coworker said the ghost stands over the bed.
All right. That makes more sense. I was like, damn, weird flex, but let's get into it, you know. My coworker told me on nights she'll stand at the end of residents' beds and pinch their toes. Call bells have gone off multiple times in completely empty rooms. Apparently she's a black figure with a nursing cap people have seen out of the corner of their eye. I always avoid nights on that floor. Really makes you wonder what some of the residents are seeing at night when they're scared. Ooh, I think a nursing home would be an interesting place to be a nurse at.
Yes.
I think, at what point are you like, oh, maybe this is, dementia? And at one point are you like, oh, shit, maybe there's an actual spirit in here taking care of business?
What if there's a combination of two? Like someone has dementia, but you're in a place where there's ghost and nobody believes you.
Yeah, because I've heard some of these nurse stories you read when you're like, oof, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. Like, I don't know if I have the balls to work in a place like that and continuously go into these rooms. I would be like, I'd find a way not to go into that room on my shift. I'd be like, room 14? Nah, I'm not going in that one. Sorry. You guys can wait till the next round comes through.
Yep.
They can help Greg or whatever in there figure out what's going on with his.
But he's coding. Ghoster in there.
Yeah. Well, let him code.
Yeah.
If he's coding, maybe he can help me out.
He's 87 years old. He lived a good life.
Yeah. Way to go, Greg. Shout out, Greg. You did it. Sorry I wasn't more courageous, Greg. You deserved that. That's why I'm not a nurse, I guess.
True. I couldn't do it. We on to another one? Lee 97. My first few weeks, I was outside a 6-bed bay. I was stocking up the gloves, and at the corner of my eye, I seen a woman wearing a hospital gown, but her own cardigan over it. She walked pretty fast into the toilet, and I, thoughtful to myself, who the hell in here is moving that fast on their own? It was an older adult. It was an older adult acute orthopedic ward, so it was mostly elderly people recovering from broken bones. Long-term surgical care patients, so most of the patients were bed patients or needed assistance moving. I looked, and all 6 patients were in bed or in their chairs. Naturally, I assumed a patient from elsewhere had wandered in. I walked into the bathroom, and no one was there. I didn't look at her directly, but she certainly looked like the average elderly female patient. The more I think about how she moved, it was more like floating, hovering, than walking fast. Been on the job 2 years now, and I've never seen anything like that since.
Wait, so this person went in the bathroom after them and still saw them in there?
No, didn't see anybody.
Oh, okay.
But she was talking about how they had a good look, a pretty decent look at it, and then there was still nobody in there.
The floating, hovering thing always kind of creeps me out a little bit.
Yeah. We've
heard a few stories over the last year and a half that involve that, like just the movement, like the fluid movement of something like that. It just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
That would be really weird.
It's just unnatural. I think anything that's unnatural, like, I mean, the same way they shoot those horror movies in Hollywood where like the crawling down the stairs, like they'll film it backwards.
Yeah.
So that it just looks weird and just puts you off. Like, no, that's not natural.
It's funny how such a simple filming trick
Oh, yeah.
works in horror movies.
Yeah. Yeah, there's plenty of them, but that one in particular always gets me.
Yeah. Sometimes they do it with the person actually crawling back, like with their limbs backwards. Too.
Yeah. No thanks. Yeah, that's spooky though. Nobody wants to see something. What's with the bathrooms? We talked about this in previous episode too. Like just ghosts in bathrooms. Surely they're not in there, dropping a deuce. I can't. Like, what's the significance? Is the water in the toilets like a conduit?
Ooh, I never thought of that.
Is there something that's like conducive to why spirits would be drawn into these places?
Yeah, the flushing produces like some kind of broadcast from the dead realm, and then it bounces off the porcelain to where you're able to notice it more.
I mean, it checks out for me, but I'm not someone that studies that. Yeah, we can't say for sure.
Yeah. What if we miss a lot of ghost sightings because everybody's on their phones TikToking when they're in the bathroom now?
I think,
and the ghosts are looking at the TikTok over your shoulder, and you don't even catch it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Next time you're in the bathroom, listeners, look over your shoulder while you're on the phone. Yeah. Maybe somebody will be looking with you.
Yeah, when you're doing your ridiculous TikTok dances, make sure you glance behind you every once in a while. Yeah. You will most likely see a bunch of normal people concerned with your actions, but maybe also a ghost.
Yes.
Maybe a ghost. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen like over the years with Snapchat and stuff where people go to take a picture and like Snapchat will recognize a face in the nothingness and put the little face on or the filter on top of it. And they're like, there's nobody there. You're like, or is there?
Yeah.
They Snapchat deciding there's a ghost in the room with you and he also wants to look pretty.
Yeah, the Snapchat has a secret ghost algorithm.
Way to go, Snapchat. Way to go, Instagram and Facebook and our supreme overlords, the Zuck.
Yeah.
For capitalizing on someone else's success, buying their competitor and driving them into the ground.
All hail corporate overlords.
King Zuck. That got pretty dark pretty quick. That's what happens in the morning episodes. We bring reality. Do you think we have the personalities to have a really poppin' podcast, to have something that is like super popular? Or do you think that we like have this weird sphere of listeners that are just like us, where we're just kind of like mellow?
I think that there's a lot of people that are just like us. Sometimes I think it's easy for us individuals, to think that we're all alone in the world.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But then you all of a sudden realize there's a lot of people that like what you like or into the weird music you're into.
Yeah. I mean more or less, like you look at like really popular podcasts out there and there's at least the hosts have like this weird eccentricity about them, where they're just like super amped up when they talk. Like, hey, you're listening to, like, it's like old school, like radio broadcast type shit. But you and I don't really have that.
No.
We're pretty calm.
But there are a lot of people with podcasts that aren't quite like old school radio. Yeah. It's almost to the point now, I don't think I listen to many of those types. And when I do hear one, it's kind of off-putting. I'm like, this isn't radio.
Yeah, get out of here.
Yeah, I didn't tune you in on my FM or AM dial.
So I guess if you're listening, tell us, write in. We gave you all the links. Write in. Why do you listen to the podcast? Do you listen for the stories? Do you listen because you like to hear Christian and I argue with each other? Or do you listen to learn? Are you here to learn? I feel bad for you if you're here to learn about the paranormal because we don't fully know. We're just talking about it.
I know.
You don't believe him. Number one. That doesn't make sense. But we want to hear from you guys either way. All right, this next one is from a weird person, 1670. My friend's mom is an ER nurse. She was in the elevator alone. She pressed the 4th floor. It went to the 8th floor instead. A woman entered and went to the 1st floor. When they hit the 1st floor, the woman disappeared. She went to the 4th floor, did her rounds. She went to the 8th floor and asked about the woman. She had died a few years before from lung cancer. It was her spirit that she saw that day. Wow, that's like some elevator game shit. I'm not sure that would freak me out too much. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine getting in an elevator, pushing a button, going up twice as high, someone else getting in the elevator, coming down, and when they reach the ground floor, they just disappear?
And then being like sane enough to go do your rounds before. Yeah. That's why nurses are badasses. They're like, I just saw a ghost, but I had to go take care of my patients.
All right, well, there she is again. There's old Linda from 8th floor.
Yeah, and then when she goes to ask the 8th floor, they're like, yeah, we see her all the time.
Yeah, lung cancer. Yeah, another one bit the dust. All right, back in the elevator. Got work to do.
It's like that Tsunami ghost where she showed up to have tea with her friends, and her friends just sat there and had tea with her. Like, this is normal.
Old wet butt.
Yeah.
Old wet butt. Yeah, no, that's creepy. I can't, like, I know the stuff that I've seen, and most of it has been, in the night hours.
Yeah.
And it freaked me out enough then. I can't imagine seeing something just broad daylight, physically walk into, like, a room that I'm in, whatever, fiddle around, walk out, and be like, oh, that was a ghost.
Yeah.
I would not be able to stop thinking about that for a while.
But if it was your job, you'd probably just get used to it.
No. I don't think I would.
People get used to some weird things.
Yeah, I get used to being freaked out like a little bit, but seeing, like, physically seeing something, that's a little harder for me to be like, oh, I feel great. This is fine. Who am I? I'm not a nurse for a reason, right? We've had a couple nurses on the podcast tell some stories, and they're always zingers, man.
Yeah.
They got the best stories. Like 100% of the time, if you sit down with the nurse, you're like, hey, what's the weirdest thing you've seen while you're working? They're like, oh, I've got, which one you want to hear? I got a dozen.
Yeah.
Well, shit.
When I was talking to my sister about this episode, she seems to have a lot between her and her friends. So we should be hearing from them soon, I hope.
Yeah. She didn't tell you any of, like, the paranormal stuff? Like, she's
I don't think she has as many, but a lot of the people she works with, it's like normal conversation. They've all seen stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, we'd love to hear those stories. Do an entire, like, follow-up episode with actual nurse stories that we hear from people we know.
I'm working on it. I have a lot of nurse friends. So I'm like, hey.
We talked, a lot of people loved the finale with Amanda last season. So we kind of talked about getting her back on for the finale this season too. I think that'd be good because she was great to talk to, number one. She had great stories and she seems really interested in the topics and stuff. So,
and she comes from a place of believing, but different than, say, your place of believing.
The sphere of religion? Or?
Yeah, she can basically tell you, like, the reason and the way ghosts or why ghosts are ghosts, or she seems to have that, like, psychic connection that
could be.
Yeah.
She seemed from the sound of it, like, she did a lot of research and stuff. Like, she's been fascinated with it, where I've been fascinated with it, but I don't do deep dives on most of the stuff that
probably a good thing. It'd be scarier.
Well, yeah, that's the whole reason I don't do it.
Yeah.
But what can you do? Amanda, if you're out there, we want to have you for the finale again.
Okay, here's a little short one. Professor Mo Rune. Cold wind. More than 300 people died on my hands in only 3.5 years of palliative care. When I see a black fly in a room, I know that somebody in the room will die.
Time.
That's weird. Little weird, creepy, short one that might be bull.
Is that a haiku?
Maybe. It did kind of feel
Cold
like
wind. More than 300 people died on my hands in only 3.5 years on palliative care unit. When I see black fly in room, I know that somebody in room will die. Time. Weird. That's like cryptic. It's like, what is this about? If someone told me that, I would leave immediately. Someone was like, if they just walked up to me and said that, I'd be like, yeah, it's about time I hit the old dusty trail on this conversation. I'll see you later. Yeah.
The fun thing about Reddit is sometimes you run into stuff like that and you're like, you think like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And then you move on quickly because you feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like the story of my life. Move on quickly because you feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird. That's a weird one.
If you understand that story, the government will hire you in their special operations unit.
There you go.
And you will brainwash people the rest of your life.
But before you do that, let us know what they meant.
Yeah.
Especially if you are Professor Mo Rune. Did I tell you earlier, it was either this week or last week when I was getting into my car, I heard someone say, dude.
I think you texted me that.
Yeah. It was the weirdest thing, and it kind of set me off a little bit, but I was sitting there after I heard it. I'm like, the car's in the garage, right? Mm-hmm. So I get down, I get in the car, get everything set up before I open the garage to leave. And as I'm like in the car, I put my stuff down on the seat. As I'm going to turn the ignition, I just hear, dude. And I'm like, it stops me enough to where I'm like looking around like, did someone just say dude to me? Is there a ghost in here that says dude in my car? Dude in my car.
Yeah.
Not dude, where's my car? But yeah, it was the strangest thing, but it didn't freak me out. It was just, I had a second guess. I'm like, did I hear someone say dude? And I was like trying to like move my jacket enough to see if it was just like making dude sounds. As jackets do sometimes. You move and it's like, dude. Yeah. But no, nothing. Weirdest fucking thing. And I just went to work.
Yeah. See, I told you just get used to things. And when you're adulting, scary stuff, sometimes you just have to go through it.
You just have to go through it. Life advice. Yeah, anyway, that was a pointless little anecdote for everyone.
Yes,
you're welcome. This next one comes to us from Erica Jackson,
but with the one.
Jackson.
Sorry, Miss Jackson.
Yeah, Panic at the Disco reference. I worked at a LTC facility a few years back. I had one spooky incident that I will never forget. I was training for third shift. On our rounds to get them up and ready for the day, I met a resident that at the time I was convinced was possessed. The nurse training me had warned me beforehand that she was mean, and I prepared myself for some physical assaults and name-calling. Sure enough, I was met with being called a bitch, and she tried to pinch me and kick me, but I wasn't offended and felt quite bad for her because I thought it was possible she had been abused in the past. The nurse told me that she would settle down after I got her a donut stick, so I managed to get her dressed and in her chair unharmed. I rolled her out into the common area as she continuously called me names. So I said, "Calm down, Miss Lee. I have your donut stick here." That was my nurse. That was a nurse that's kind of tired of everyone's shit.
Yeah.
She got quiet and took it from my hand, and as she took a bite, I leaned down so we would be face to face. She had this beautiful, vivid green eye color, which now come to think of it, most elderly folks' eyes aren't very vivid in color. And I told her how beautiful her eyes were. But as I said it, I noticed that her pupils were like a cat's. Creepy. They were elongated and slit-like. I jumped back from where I had been standing, and she didn't move at all. She was gazing straight ahead and looked as if she was in a trance. I got spooked so badly and was immediately reminded of The Exorcist 3. I'm not sure if it was demonic or what they call reptilian now, but back then in 2002, I hadn't heard anything about them, so I was convinced it was demonic. I'm not sure what it was, but the feeling I got makes me believe that it definitely wasn't human. Anyway, I didn't go back to that job. I found another one at a different LTC facility. Wow. So we're talking either demons or lizard people.
Either one of them you don't want to see.
Yeah, but either one of them I love talking about.
Yeah.
Great conversation starters. If you see me out in the world, walk up and be like, lizard people, and I'll be like, well, don't mind if I do.
It's reptilian.
You keep saying that.
We have talked about this before.
Lizard person.
You're a lizaist.
Lizaist. Yeah, well,
that makes no sense.
I wear it with a badge of honor.
Yes, you do.
I wear it like a badge of honor, not with one. It's not right next to my badge of honor.
You have a badge of honor?
I'm going to have a lot of fun editing out all these giant spikes.
Yeah.
But it's too late to restart now.
You once picked on me relentlessly for coughing.
Oh, yeah. And I will continue to do so.
And I only coughed like twice.
Ideas.
We're on number 20.
I know.
Nobody even listening realizes it.
And we're on number 1 for the listeners.
So what would you do if you looked into somebody's eyes and they had like slits for eyes?
I'd probably start praying, because if you don't understand something, you're just like, I don't know what that is, but please make it stop.
In my movie, the minute like, you would see that, you'd recognize it, you'd start praying, and then the slit-eyed person would start laughing at you.
But in like a really deep voice.
Yeah.
They're like, ho, 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 ho. You're like, oh, shit.
Yep.
That was a very deep voice, lady.
Yeah.
Miss Lee, take your donut stick and you get back to normal people stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's donut sticks. Do you have a demon? Get donut sticks.
Yeah, apparently that's all it takes. Nah, but that's weird, man. I don't know. Like, I mean, we've all seen YouTube videos where people are like at a press conference, someone's talking, and then they freeze like one of the frames, and they move frame by frame, and they're like, that's their lizard eyes.
Yeah.
You can see Justin Bieber during this interview with his lizard eyes. And you're like, I think you don't understand the way frame rates work with cameras. But outside of that,
they really don't, because I see so many of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's obviously just a camera issue.
Yeah, that for sure is a camera issue. There's one way I would be able to say, oh, that's not a camera issue. If it was shot in like 4K or something like that, and you legitimately see like the side lids close before the top one, bottom ones, then I'd be like, oh, that's a legit like lizard and or cat person eye. No thanks.
You know what I'd be? I was like, ooh, that's good editing.
Yeah, you probably would be like that.
But also, I mean, it would be good because people can do that now.
Sure.
In 4K, we don't see that kind of David Icke reptilian, the Queen's reptilian type of thing.
Yeah.
As much anymore with 4K.
I wish I would have saved, like, you know how I listened to, I watch on YouTube, there's a show, The Best Business Show, right? Mm-hmm. And I've sent you a few links of them. One of the episodes he had, I think Sagar on from Breaking Points, and they were talking about something, and randomly Pomp is talking about, he was sitting in a coffee shop talking shop with some other guy, like a friend of his or something like that, and they were talking about the Fed and like the SEC and all this shit, and like someone comes up to him and was like, I couldn't help but overhear that you were talking about this, and he starts like sitting down and like talking to Pomp about all this shit, and he mentions lizard people, he mentions all this shit, and he was like, oh, the reason I know this is because I think he was a lawyer or something for the SEC. And Pomp is just like retelling this, like kind of like funny, haha. But I heard that, I'm like, what the fuck? Like some random dude just comes up to you and he's like, oh yeah, the reason I know all this stuff is because, you know, I was a pretty big shot lawyer for the SEC back in the day.
Some of those stories they're so intricate, and the person telling them is such a believer.
Yeah.
That you're like, for a second, you're like, what if that's true? And then me,
that's
I'm like,
what gets you though.
Yeah.
Like,
with me, I'm like, hell no.
Yeah.
But other people are like, lizard people. Yeah. I've seen them.
He was talking off-world societies and shit like that. And so, but for me, I'm like, okay, what if you were to take that and then you just backtrack and back, okay, this dude was a pretty big lawyer for the SEC at one point. If that paperwork matches, whatever.
Was is the key phrase. Was until he had a mental breakdown.
See, that's where, that's where you would go with the story. But for me, I'd be like, man, maybe he saw some weird shit in the government.
Maybe he did, because we've heard these stories, and some of these people did have like mental breakdowns. That's why they're a former or whatever they are.
Sure, yeah.
But now they have no credibility to the populace because of their, which isn't right either. Everybody can have a mental break for a while. You or I could, and that shouldn't disqualify us from ever telling the truth in the future.
Sure, yeah.
And that comes from me as a skeptic that doesn't believe these kind of things. But sometimes people that have had episodes earlier in life see crazy things. I mean, and if they're true, we're screwed in certain cases.
Look at, who is it? Phil Schneider? Look at Phil Schneider's story. He talks lizard people to some extent, like going down like these deep underground military bases, having a firefight with these aliens and stuff. Like, this is documented stuff from someone that was pretty high up in whatever he was working on for the government, contracted to build these types of bases and stuff like that too.
In this case,
I don't know, man.
There's only one other explanation for his story, and that's disinformation. Yeah, it's either true or it's disinformation. There's really nothing else for that story, and that's where you're kind of stuck, because the government has produced a lot of disinformation on stuff like that.
But if he ends up getting murdered, I can't imagine disinformation is, or quote unquote committing suicide by the weirdest means.
What if he gets macked?
Return of the Mac, yeah.
Steps out in front of a car.
Yeah, you've been macked. No, I don't think
that's so cold.
Yeah, got macked. Yeah. No,
I have a feeling that will come up again, because that's kind of fun.
Yeah. What do you think? Okay, so tell me, what's your explanation for old Slit Eyes in this old story? To bring it back around to the nurse story after we derailed it with Off-World, the Best Business Show, and Lizard People.
It's hard for me to believe it.
So do you just think that this story didn't happen?
Maybe something happened similar. I mean, if you're in this kind of a long-term care facility, and you talk about dementia and how mean some people get when they start losing it, that's hard to, I don't know how the nurses that work in those places do it, because that's somebody that was once a kind human being that spews filth from their mouth because they have dementia.
Thick skin, though.
Yeah. How do you, but on some level, that's either still going to get through a little bit, or your skin is so thick that you lose a lot of enjoyment in life, because that's how you have to be during your work life.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. I do think like you do develop kind of thick skin with something like that. But for me, it's probably even more so reliable coming from that kind of source. Someone that has seen a lot of really messed up shit, has dealt with a lot of really messed up shit. If a nurse came up to me and was like, yo, I just was looking in my patient's eyes and they had fucking cat eyes or lizard person eyes, like, I would believe them, unless they were like, oh, this is hour 48 of my shift. I'm kind of run down right now, and I'm pretty sure looked at Karen's eyes and she had lizard eyes. Yeah. And you'd be like, okay, it's time for you to go home.
Yeah. And I thought it was real for a second. Then I realized that I haven't had my uppers in 2 days.
Yeah. So
not that that's what happens.
Maybe. But so we have a story here where we don't know that detail per se. She could have been working like a double, something like that. Maybe she's overworked or maybe she's overtired at this point and she's just seeing things. But let's, for the sake of argument, just say that that's not the case. And that this is a normal 8-10 hour shift, whatever. And she witnesses these lizard eyes. Is there any explanation that you could give for a human being having random cat eyes or lizard eyes without it being demonic or lizard people?
Don't, but what I'm going to say is in support of the veracity, I guess, of these stories, because they're nurses, similar to like cops or military people whose lives and their job is to be under stress constantly. Yeah. Aren't going to react the same way to stress as like you and I would, where, if they see something, they're going to react with kind of calm this is my life type of thing, when you and I might run screaming down the hall.
Yeah.
So their stories have a little bit more credibility because they don't just panic typically. So they're in control of their thoughts, and they're still pretty rational in very intense situations.
Yeah.
So their stories hold a lot more credibility because they're not telling it from a place of fear and, being terrified. Unless in this case, this one sounds pretty terrifying when you believe in other humans or reptilian.
Yeah, I mean, if you get to that point, especially someone like you who doesn't even believe in like quote unquote reptilians or lizard people, you think it's about as far-fetched as you can get, right? So that's why I would love for you to have an encounter like that where you were to witness this and be like, I honestly have no idea what I saw.
I would probably be able to say that, but also I've been, sometimes you just get those extreme vibes from certain individuals, and maybe that's what this is, whether it's a reptilian or a demonic possession or whatever.
You think you've been in the vicinity of someone that was a reptilian?
No, not really. I think I've been in the vicinity of people that just give you these really horrible vibes that you need to get away from because something feels dangerous.
Off.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet you've been around a reptilian.
Or a reptile, one or the other.
Could be both.
Do you think reptilians have a reptile dysfunction?
There you go. Probably. They probably do.
Yeah. That's... I don't even know why I attempted that one, but...
You needed the funny, I got the dad jokes right here, but you whipped one out for yourself.
Yep.
On the house.
This one comes from Thought Catalog, which is obviously is Reddit mostly. But I didn't have this person's username. Did a rotation in a burn unit.
This story comes to us from My Dog Operates Better Than You.
How'd you figure out that?
I pushed the number 1.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly. I was figured that out the other day and forgot about it.
Yeah.
All right. Did a rotation in a burn unit. There are tons of stories that go around, but I'll share my favorite. Here we go. A pimp lit one of his prostitutes on fire.
Classic.
Yeah.
Classic pimp behavior right there.
Yep. And she immediately bear hugged him, causing them both to suffer pretty severe injuries. Unfortunately, hers included an inhalation burn.
Oof.
They both were being treated in the same ICU, but on opposite ends. Weeks later, she ends up coding and passes away. And after about 30 minutes, as things start to quiet down, the guy starts screaming from his room, "Get her out. Get the goddamn bitch out of my room. Karma."
Yeah. Good old pimp justice.
That one I thought was a fun story just because it was just. I mean, the story's tragic. It's horrible.
Sure, yeah.
But the revenge at the end was just the kind of...
Like, you see what you did to me, asshole?
Yeah. It's like catharsis of you felt good afterwards. You're like, she got him.
Yeah. See, again, man, I know I say this a lot, but how can you not believe in ghosts after you hear stories like this? Like 30 minutes later, this same dude that did this to her is like, "Oh, get that bitch out of my room." Like,
yeah,
no.
You did the exact voice too.
Yeah, I know. Well, I have a lot of experience with pimps. Yeah, I lived in Vegas for many a year. I actually remember filling up my gas tank once at a if you can believe it, gas station in Vegas, and I looked over and there was like a van, and 100% the dude driving the van was a pimp, and like the 3 girls or 3 women that were with him were 100% prostitutes. Yeah, you didn't even need a glance. Like in your peripheral alone, you could be like, prostitutes and a pimp.
I think people that have visited Vegas or lived there understand exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. My old manager, he would actually, as he was driving Boulder Highway, I think he'd play over and under with how many prostitutes he'd see. Wow. Yeah. Like there's that many. It was just like, every time we drive by, it's like, you want to play over under? I'm like, I lose either way. No, I'm good.
Well, if you walk down the strip, they hand out cards to them.
They do. Yeah. Let's make some NFTs out of those prostitute cards. That's Vegas. Take notes. NFTs, prostitute cards.
Now we're going to see it.
I know. And if you don't send even a portion of those to the Freaky Deaky, you messed up.
Yeah. I mean, we gave you the idea.
We did.
We're fine with you becoming rich off of it.
We did. Yeah.
Just send a nice little donation to the inspiration.
That's why I haven't shared what my design is yet with with this NFT business, because I don't want anyone ripping it off, and that happens to me all the fucking time. So I'd rather get it in the system, get it all down, than let people try to make copies or whatever bullshit they want.
Yeah, I understand, man.
Yep. This next one comes to us from Deleted. Terrific. If you're out there, Deleted, we'd like to hear from you. I've worked in a small family-run nursing home for 6 years as a nurse aide. It was an orphanage before it became a nursing home, and unfortunately, before being shut down, the orphanage had a history of severe abuse and neglect.
Which sounds typical of orphanages.
Par for the course. It's not gossip. The owner herself has told us. When residents get close to death, they always see a little girl. One of my patients was a very alert gentleman. He knew all of our names and was very alert and oriented. I was passing dinner trays and saw that he had his back turned and was talking and laughing in the corner. I knocked and asked him who he was talking to, and he chuckled and said, "This little girl came into my room. She was scared." He died 3 days later. About 6 months later, had another patient screaming about a little girl grabbing his feet, and she needed to leave him alone. He died that night. She's come up over the years. It's always the same thing. They see her and then they die. Other coworkers have had the same experience. It's very unsettling. That's like a tiny Grim Reaper, like in like a more candy-coated package than what you imagine when you think Grim Reaper.
Yeah, maybe your I guess tour guide or your
Angel of Death.
Yeah, there's that their job, I guess, to come and pick you up or guide you through the next realm or to the next realm and kind of maybe help you. Maybe they just come in all different styles. Maybe you get what you need to help you calmly pass over.
Now, do you think that is the same entity, just in a different suit? Or do you think there's just a room full of like death angels, let's say, or death bringers, or reapers?
Let's say that's some kind of spirit or ghost.
Because there's a lot of stories, though, right?
There's a lot of stories about this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they just know. They can see that tunnel opening before everybody else can. And then they're there to help.
They're like, ooh, dibs, I get this one.
Yeah, they're like, this really scared me the first time I went through it, but here, I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
I'm going to come touch you because I know you're close.
It's weird, like hearing just the variation of stories that you hear. Like this one in particular is interesting because multiple people see the same thing. The same
It's
not
girl.
like it changes for different patients or whatever, but I've heard stories over the years where it's like a family member, or I see, oh, look, this is my dead grandma, or all my parents are waiting just outside the light.
Yeah.
I've even had the one where the person's like, how we kind of talk about, in the twins episode or whatever, like Heather mentions, her brother dying in the womb or whatever.
Yeah.
I've had that type of stuff where when someone died, they were like coded on a table or something, and they thought they died. Someone was showing them around the afterlife.
Yeah.
And then they came back to find out that it was like, their dead sibling they had no idea about. So there's just a lot of stuff. And I've always wondered, like, what's the prerequisite for that, for who gets chosen as that particular entity? Is it just something like whoever is the best fit for you, or whoever, like, I mean, it seems like someone at the top would have to be making those shot callers, right?
Or maybe the person is just like, before I move on, I want to help people. And they just stick around, and then later on we call them ghosts and make these scary stories out of them when they're just there to help. Maybe there was one story that didn't make it into here because it's an EMT story where they're taking this older guy and is in an ambulance. He had some kind of heart issue.
Yeah,
he's there with his daughter, and then the EMT says he looks up into the corner of the vehicle and says, "Don't worry, Lulu, I'll be with you soon." Yeah. And then he coded.
That's the type of shit. Yeah.
And then the EMT asked the daughter who he was talking to. It was his wife that had died 20 years earlier.
Yeah. Well, dude, like, and I think we talked about it, and maybe it was near death episode. Maybe it was a couple, but there's been a couple people that have on their deathbed, like, will look over and be like, oh, like, who was it? Was it Edison or who like woke up from a coma and like kind of looked up and was like, it's very beautiful over there, and then just died.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird, dude. And then Steve Jobs, same thing, like, where he was just like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're like, dude, what are you, like, that's where I get.
Steve Jobs went out thinking of Owen Wilson.
Yeah. Wow.
Have you seen that mashup of all his different
wows? Best. Yeah. It's the best. One of them made parents one of our YouTube videos. I used it like twice when I said wow. I just put like a two frame image of Owen Wilson's head over my head because I said wow too much. And I was
we probably started that TikTok.
No, it's popping off way before we were on TikTok. But yeah, I don't know. Those stories always just get me. Like, I always just wonder, especially like I'm as someone that is low key not looking forward to death, there's a part of that curiosity that just jumps in. And you're like, what's on the other side? Like, what awaits us when we get to that point? Because you hear all these stories and you just kind of want to a certain extent, you want to experience, like, what's my experience going to be like? Yeah. What am I going to see? Is it going to be beautiful or is it going to be terrifying? You know, are you like, oh shit, no, put me back. I
can tell you exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be
whatever you make it, Scott. That's
exactly,
what's going to be. Exactly. Yeah, I knew that.
Because it really is.
Some weird hippie shit was going
to me, that point is going to be the next great adventure.
Yeah.
I don't know. And adventures aren't always fun all the way through. And that's what maybe gives you the hope and the excitement with adventures, because you can know that things like that don't always turn out perfect.
The question would be, is that afterlife that people witness now, is that just a hallway to another life? Like, is that just like almost like purgatory into another event where you're in a different world now?
And when you're saying purgatory, it's not the normal definition we put on it. It's just a waiting place, kind of.
Yeah.
Like the ancient form of the underworld, where it's a waiting place in the middle of your journey to that next place.
Yeah.
The afterlife.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not trying to get all philosophical here, but this is about nurse stories and stuff. But yeah, these are the types of things like where if I think about one thing, it'll just take hold, and then you'll go into a different thing, and then you'll think about this, then you'll be thinking about that.
My favorite way to think about it is Beetlejuice in that waiting room. That was amazing. Smack Max, which is a very good name. When you say it like you did.
Sounds like an off-brand, like, cereal.
Yeah.
Hey, can you hand me some of the Smack Max?
It will be now.
There you go.
A ward I worked on once had a patient who was a psychic/medium. We had a bit of a laugh with her as she was on the ward for a while. She'd had a stroke, which affected her mobility, and she would do readings for the staff from time to time. I took it all as just a bit of fun until one evening when she pressed her nurse call buzzer and told us to go check on a patient in a side room as he was dead. We went to check and sure enough found the gentleman had died. Later on, we asked our psychic patient how she had known, and she told us she had seen him coming out of his room, obviously distressed. She realized he had died and had to explain to him what had happened and help him pass over and go to the light. Now, I'm not a believer, but that gave me the creeps.
Man, that is exactly what we were just talking about. Like, that's some shit. Like, that's, again, where you, like, this dude died. No one was there for him. He's, like, walking out of the room like, what the hell? What just happened? I'm freaking out.
Now, could these type of stories be like the ghost effect from back in Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore's movie, where all of a sudden we kind of looked at ghosts differently? I don't know if you've seen that movie. That's an old
I have, but it's been a really long time, so you might have to walk me through that one.
Well, basically, like Whoopi Goldberg's character saw ghosts, and some of them were really freaked the hell out because they were like, "What the hell am I doing here? I'm dead." But they could, and like, you could see just the different aspects of like how confusing it must be for some people to die.
Spiritually lost, perhaps, where like they just didn't even have a side they were on, didn't think about it or anything like that. So when they died, they're just like, what's happening? Maybe it could be. So I wondered, did she just to give him advice when he came out and was nervous? Was she like, what you got to do is you got to find someone to love. You got to go throw some clay. All right, go throw some clay.
And then he disappears, and you're like, what does throw clay mean?
Yeah, he's like, that doesn't help at all, lady.
Yeah, and then years later. You're sitting in a long-term facility care place with your grandmother who loves instant constipation.
Yeah, I don't know if any of that made sense, but
it will.
To the right person, it will.
Yep.
Yeah. This next one earned some kind of award. So you're lucky. Philea 209. All right. My daughter was diagnosed with ALL.
ALL.
Okay. She was diagnosed with everything.
Yeah.
My daughter was diagnosed with ALL when she was 3. We were sent to Oakland Children's Hospital for treatment. At first, I was so scared, not just because of the realization that this was going to be my and her new life, also the sinking fact that I was a single teen mom, only 19 when she was diagnosed. While they prepared transportation, it all hit me like a speeding train. I cried nonstop like I was the baby with cancer. I know, selfish me, but it was scary for both of us, and in a way, we were both babies. The doctor could tell in my facial expression. Please no, not Oakland, I said. He reassured me everything was going to be fine. They were already prepping to start chemotherapy for her that night. I still have my doubts. I was just a teenager who didn't know any better. But as soon as we got there, those doctors and nurses, they were incredible. God, they had everything so put together, and how they got a young teen mom to understand everything and make me feel important like my daughter was the only one there fighting cancer. I don't know how they do it. They look death in the face every day, and they still fight day after day after day. I tell you, boy, they didn't come to lose. We're on the 5th floor in the room. Could have been the penthouse. It was so huge, and the windows were wall to wall. You could see all of Oakland, all of San Francisco, the Bay Bridge, and the Golden Gate Bridge. Those lights, they always meant something different to me after those nights in the hospital. They were lights of hope, lights of a fight, lights of life, lights of survival. Okay, I'm sorry. My point is the first night they admit my daughter. There's another little girl. She piques my interest, not just because she's the only one getting admitted with my daughter, but because she is alone, and for all I know, it's like an ER department with cancer patients. I had a lot to learn. She comes by herself in a taxi. Her mom, unfortunately, is a single mother with 8 children and just had a baby and couldn't afford to make the trip with her to Oakland. She's the sweetest little girl with the softest voice, and even though my time is limited and given to my daughter, regardless of how young I am, my mommy duties start to kick in for her as well. I go check on her and see her in her room. My daughter was sleeping at this time, which was pretty convenient, actually. I helped her pick out a blanket, some toys to make her room hers. At the time, it may have seemed like I was helping her, but in reality, I wasn't. She was helping me. I didn't know what type of cancer she had at that moment, but I could tell you that she had lumps all up and down her throat. You could tell they were going up into her head, down her chest. She was just full of all these lumps. I would later learn they were all cancerous tumors, and there wasn't really anything they could do for her. Her mother had waited too long to take her to the hospital, and they had already taken over her bloodstream. They're forming in the back of her eyes and on her brain. Poor baby must have been sick and suffering for a long time, so it had been within the next 24 hours her health started to decline rapidly. When I came back to check on her, I couldn't believe my eyes. She was already hooked up to a breathing machine. She didn't have very much longer left, and I was just in shock. That was my first time witnessing what cancer was really made of. Death. And even though my daughter didn't have the same cancer, I couldn't get it across my head that it was going to be 2 different diagnoses and prognosis. It was the beginning stages of my daughter's chemotherapy, and whatever minutes I could squeeze away, I tried, but my daughter really needed me at that time, and the prednisone was already changing my daughter. So I believe maybe on the second day, it could have been the third, I laid in bed with my baby, and we read a story, and I rubbed her hair. She laid there sleeping. Something told me to look up, and our door has a glass window. I seen a little girl. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy. She looked at me and smiled, and I waved. I was trying to hurry up and get off the bed, so I put my feet down, put my slippers on, and when I looked up, she was gone. I thought maybe she went to the activity room. So I start to come out of my door, and the nurses are all running to her room. I thought, oh my God, did she fall? My nurse comes up to me and asks me if my daughter's okay. I tell her yes, and I begin to ask about the little girl. She gives me a look like I can't say anything to you. Is her mom here at least? She shakes her head no. Her mom still hasn't made it. You could tell she was impatiently waiting for me to wrap it up. They needed all hands on deck, obviously. She was coding. I found out the following day she never made it off that breathing machine. I don't know why, but I'm so glad I was able to love her, even if it was just for 3 days. I'm a loyal person. I love with my whole heart, and truly believe she was put in my path for a reason, and I was put in hers for a reason. Why she chose to come and say goodbye to me maybe could have been convenience or something else. I'll never know, but I think about her. She should have been 18 like my daughter now. I'm just glad she's not suffering anymore. Also, when I think back about it, she didn't have those bumps anymore. I was in denial for a while. I even thought maybe the nurses just weren't telling me the truth, patient confidentiality. When her mom finally made it there, they removed all the tubes and gave her some time with her daughter. The nurses told her about me and she wanted to thank me. I agreed. We talked and we cried. I didn't share with her what happened right before her daughter died. I didn't want her to think I was crazy. This is the first time I'm telling this story. It's been 14 years. I'm so sorry if it's too long. Well, first and foremost, very sad story, Philea.
Not quite a nurse story, but there were nurses in it.
Yeah, and secondly, the importance, I can't stress this enough, to anyone who may be listening to this podcast right now, this is important data, and it may seem crass and harsh right off the top. The importance of line breaks in your Reddit posts, guys, it is second to none. Okay, it is an important thing when you are typing up a story on Reddit. Put some fucking breaks in your. This is a god, dude.
I was waiting for something so serious,
dude. It's like
I was waiting for like, be kind to others because they could die at any moment.
Yeah, no, that all that sure, but also fucking separate your paragraphs, guys. It's paragraphs. Touching story, very, very heartfelt and sad. And I feel like I may need to break out the dad jokes after that one. But yeah, line breaks, folks. Line breaks. It's important. And proofread. Just give it a once over before you hit send, submit. That's all.
Sometimes proofreading doesn't work. I've noticed working on this podcast because you'll proofread something and then you'll show up here to record it and you're like, what the hell did I put there?
It doesn't make any sense. And I looked at this 10 times. No sense at all. Yeah. Whew. Yeah, that's kind of sad one. That's sad. But it's nice that at the end, like, she did come by and was like, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what got me about it a lot, too, is like you forget how privileged some of us are. These two moms, one is 19 at the time, which I was a young parent, so it is pretty scary.
Yeah.
And you aren't prepared no matter what you think. And then the other mom who had, just 8 children and couldn't afford to go with her daughter to the hospital every day. People in this world and in this country struggle like that.
Yeah.
We kind of don't think about it.
I would struggle with that myself. Yeah. I don't have the type of money that allows me to go to the hospital if I need to. Like,
yeah.
Look, I don't know if you noticed, I have a wrap on my middle finger right now that I probably should have gone to the hospital.
Yeah.
For
let that be a lesson to you when you're flipping off other drivers.
Yeah. I was like, fuck you. And someone just grabbed my finger and broke it in half. Yeah. No, I was going to wash a ceramic bowl in the sink.
I could see this coming already.
And as I was washing it, oops, slipped out of my hands. And as I was reaching for it, my brain was like, hey, Scott, don't reach for that fucking bowl, dude. It's going to shatter and you're going to be hurt. And I was like, nah, I got it. And as I reached, it touched the bottom, it shattered, and my hand went directly into it. Shard went into the worst possible place in my hand. It was the very base knuckle, like right here, between my ring finger and my middle finger, and it's cut like clear across.
Awesome.
Right? And so it was just bleeding. And like China's in the other room, like, did you break a bowl? I'm like, yeah, might have broken a lot more than that. Give me a second, And so, I was concerned. Like, I probably should have gone and get stitches because this is going to heal very weird. And I'm going to look like, well, luckily it's hidden with my other fingers, but it's going to have a nasty ass scar to it.
What if you became webbed? You could swim better, but since it's only on one hand, you'd swim really fast in circles.
Yeah, I think the ratio of how much better I would swim with this would be very, very low.
You never know, man.
You don't know, but I think, that was a sad story right there, and we're gonna end it after one more story from our listeners. All right, so that was a pretty sad story, Christian. That was a sad story, and so to number one, get us back in the good spirits, I'm gonna whip out a dad joke. I feel like I got to, let's lighten the mood a little bit.
Next time you say that, can you not use whip out first? It just feels really...
I'm going to whip out my dad jokes.
Yeah.
And so we're going to lighten the mood a little bit. And then we have a story from a listener, Chi, which I'm not going to say your last name, Chi, just in case you didn't want it out there. But it's not a nurse story so much as it is, but it did happen in a hospital. Chi sent it into us after our, I think, Janitor episode. I think it was the Janitor episode. I may be mistaken on that, but we are going to read it off. Thanks for sending it in, as always. And while we're talking about listener stories, I should also mention we got a really banger of a Ouija story from another listener, Tristan, that I was supposed to read in Tales from the Ouija Part 2, and I didn't do it. And I didn't do it because I forgot I had it. But now, in the next Ouija episode we do, I'm going to include Tristan's story as well, which is just...
Why don't we just make it a YouTube story?
We could. That might work. Yeah. Tristan, if you're down for that, shoot us an email. Also, shoot us an email, and I will... Or respond to the email that I sent you, and we'll send you off a sticker pack or something for sending something cool, and we'll get you something back in return. Yeah, so anyway, on to this dad joke. Let's lighten the mood just a little bit after that sad one. Christian, what do you call a can opener that doesn't work?
I don't know.
You call it a can't opener.
You know, that sounds like something the one dad from
Americant?
No, on Modern Family.
Yeah.
Phil?
Probably.
It sounds like something he would say.
Yeah. Phil, is that you? No. Did Phil write these? No. Classic. So that'll do. Okay, moving right along. Do you want to read Cheese Story?
I can read Cheese Story. I clean the hospital for a living. However, I used to work the night shift in the labor and delivery unit from 11 p.m. to 7:30 in the morning. I was so tired this one night, I decided to take a nap in the supply closet away from the nurses. The moment I closed my eyes, I heard a crowd of people walking outside the supply closet and stopped right outside the door. They were talking loudly as they approached. Then suddenly paralysis overtook me. I couldn't open my eyes or move until I heard the voices fade further and further. I got up and turned on the lights. I swear I could never sleep in the supply closet again. This was probably the only experience I've had working for 2 to 3 years at this hospital. Now I'm glad I don't work the night shift anymore.
Spooky.
That would be spooky.
Yeah. Have you ever had an experience like that where you hear just the voices?
Yeah.
Out, like right outside?
Yeah. And usually it happens when I'm sleeping at work.
Really?
Yeah, because I've had overnight jobs before. Like I used to be a night auditor at a hotel, and that's where I got some of my scary stories from.
Yeah.
And you'd fall asleep at times because there's nothing going on. And I don't know if it's because you're on high alert or something, but you don't really sleep quite the same. Like you do hear stuff and you feel stuff, and
it hits different.
Yeah. People are watching you while you're sleeping. You just get really paranoid. So maybe that's where some of these ghost stories come from. Maybe I had ghosts standing there watching over me while I was sleeping.
What if like you're tuning into like these different frequencies of like ghost radio, spirit radio, where you're on the cusp of sleep and you're slowly just going through these different frequencies as you're nodding off into dreamland, and you tap into one where there's just a ton of spirits around. They're all just talking wildly.
Yeah, and then every once in a while you do that while you're getting in the car to go to work, and you hear, dude.
Yeah, you just hear, dude. It was such a mellow dude.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like trying to get my attention. It's just, dude.
It was like, you cannot drive all the way to work like this.
I was like, wake up, dude.
Yeah, it's like but then it's a partner was like, don't yell at him. He will pee his pants. And he's like, okay, watch this. Dude.
Dude. Oh. Sing it to him. No. Yeah. So again, thanks for sending that story, and great story. If you have any other paranormal experiences, we would love to hear them. We would sprinkle them throughout our podcast history. And if, more importantly, if you guys have any episodes that you'd like us to work on, any themes in particular that you want us to get stories for, I kind of love the idea of looking for like themes of stories that happen at like slumber parties. I feel like that would be fun. I feel like there's a lot of weird like ghost stories that happen at slumber parties. Like kids get together, they play like a Ouija board or something. Shit goes horribly wrong. So yeah, if you've ever contacted the dead while hanging out with your friends overnight, send us a message.
Yes.